Hello all, Rick here with a review on Star Trek Picard's Episode 6, Bounty. I'll preface this by saying that this felt the most fan-servicey episode of the series thus far, and I did enjoy it, although it was almost a little too much. However, it does seem to be all in the service of the plot and overall theme of the show, so I'm fine with it. The central themes of this part are those of legacy and looking into the past to guide where you are going. Any episode that has the cast confronting elements of their personal and general Star Trek history is going to be replete with moments of pointing at the screen from viewers accompanied by the phrase, "I know that thing." Speaking of... So, I'm going to get this out of the way first before I get to the review. Let's explore the ships around the Athen Prime Fleet Museum, or as many as I can. It's great to get some canonical endings to these ships. There is the NX-01, but not only that, it is in its refit form, complete with the additional engineering hull that was installed, giving the classic Starfleet shape to Archer's command. Ahead of that, we have the Klingon D7 battlecruiser, followed by the Bounty, the featured bird of prey from the voyage home that completed a time travel slingshot to the past under the command of James Kirk, which is pretty fitting that that ship helps them, considering that the Bounty was being crewed by a group of aged Starfleet officers operating outside of Starfleet's jurisdiction. Next to that, of course, we have the Constitution refit class USS Enterprise NCC-1701-A, the vessel that was rechristened as the Enterprise on presidential orders and granted to Captain Kirk post-court-martial. And then ahead of that, we have the USS Titan A, posing as a museum piece, but rightly placed next to a prior Constitution class, the old Mark II, considering this is considered the Mark III, or Neo-Connie. Ahead of this, we have what I think is Picard's first command, the USS Stargazer, featured in the battle. Next up is the USS New Jersey, a vessel bearing the 2267-era Constitution look down to a T. As far as I could tell, this is a new addition to the lore, but it looks like it would have been one of the last ships to retain this shape of Constitution before the line was overhauled to the Mark II refit. Ahead of that, we have an Akira class, and I can't make out the name from what we can see, but these were constructed to confront the Borg and are still in operation, as seen in Picard Season 2. Next to that is the USS Excelsior NCC-2000, Captain Sulu's vessel and originally the transwarp prototype. After that failure, however, it went on to serve as the baseline class for one of the longest serving lines in Starfleet. Then we have the USS Voyager, the furthest travelled Starfleet vessel, apparently stripped of all its innovations from the future. Ahead of that is a Nebula class, I think, with the weapons pod loadout. On the next rung down, there is a Sabre class docked here, a Dominion War era attack ship, as well as a second Akira, next to the most notable vessel of that conflict, the USS Defiant. It's a shame Worf did not get a chance to look at it once more. Next to that was a Romulan bird of prey, not sure how that ended up in a Starfleet display, however. From the end credits, we can also speculate that the USS Pioneer is there too, and from Picard Season 2 we learn in background that the Enterprise D Saucer section is there too. I presume these are inside the museum, as it is a Space Dock class station which features a massive internal hangar. Much of this episode focuses on the past and legacy. We visit the Fleet Museum and get to examine, in passing, old heroes of Star Trek, and one poignant moment is when, in the description of Legacies, the camera pans across the older vessels and then onto the Titan A, saying how Legacy is not just retreading the past, but innovating forwards. Of course, the lineages we are examining are not just the ships sat in their docks, but the characters themselves. Seven spends a moment reflecting on Voyager, her old life, a home for 4 years, and a family that took her in. The emotions at play on her face were nostalgic, affectionate, and a touch sad, a slight longing for times past, but a time that informs her actions to this day. The young Crusher, too, continues to come to terms with his father being Admiral Picard, and like the name of the Enterprise being passed down, Jack has inherited many traits from his father. Initially, we are told that his visions are the early markers of Irumodic syndrome, afflicting him far earlier than they did in Picard. For now, these visions are dismissed as just that, but I think there is still more to them. But for now, the show is putting a pin in it and moving on. Sydney LaForge gets a lot of time in the spotlight here too, with her reflecting Jack's own struggle with a legendary parent. She too did not follow in her father's footsteps, as an engineer, unlike her sister, Mika Burton's Alandra. Her and Jack even bond over this, much to her father's chagrin. While their parents reach an impasse, it falls to them to take matters into their own hands. And Geordi too reflects on his past, on the Enterprise, and how he chose to put his life at risk back then. Another dose of hindsight informing his present actions, eventually spurring him to help. Even the Moriarty simulation comments about how these tired old warriors have their lives and history writ upon their faces. With the USS Titan on the run from Starfleet, we see that they've taken to dropping false subspace transponders across erratic warp trajectories in order to throw off their pursuers. It's a good aside that shows how they are managing to keep ahead of the fleet. That and the Titan can maintain warp 9.99 without issue. One small gripe, however, it gets mentioned later on that the Titan was discovered the minute it reached Daystrom Station because all Starfleet ships are effectively networked and share their IFF information, meaning that creating a phony identity for the Titan will not work. This was told to the crew by Geordi LaForge, yet it seems like a fleet-wide development every captain would know. Picard and Riker can be excused because they've been out of touch with the latest in Starfleet procedure, but Shaw and Seven? I think they would have known this. Shaw meeting with Geordi revealed an unexpected angle to him, but one that fits perfectly well with his career. He may disregard Picard and Riker, but he idolises Commodore LaForge for his engineering skill and contributions to ship design. This episode is also replete with reveals, one of which was caused by the slight misdirection of the trailers, with the recovery of the synthetic golem housing a conglomeration of the Soong type's minds, and even Soong himself. It is described as being predominantly Data, but with all the minds and personalities of the Soong family inside it. For now, however, we get to see a new Data emerge, although confused. While wonderful to see once more, I think it's clear in time that these new personalities will merge into a Gestalt personality. I was convinced that the Daystrom AI would be Moriarty, but not quite. Moriarty was just a single projection conjured from the mind of Data in recognition of Riker. I would have honestly liked to have seen a whole episode with the away team evading a Moriarty AI. But the whole puzzle was ironed out within minutes, which I feel did dampen the threat level, but it was all a red herring anyway. So bringing Data back again for a third time? Not sure how I feel about it. One of the universally liked things from Picard Season 1 was the farewell he and Picard had, as his mind was disabled in its finality. I'm going to have to sit with this and see how it pans out, because I don't think it necessarily cheapens the earlier death, but yeah. I can't lie though, I appreciated seeing Brent Spiner back again as Data, even this new version. It was interesting seeing him switch between the mannerisms of Lore before Data and Soong. Other Section 31 finds included a Genesis 2 device, which I initially thought was the Pegasus cloak, the corpse of James T. Kirk recovered from Viridian 3, which is a little morbid there, and a genetically modified aggressive attack Tribble, which takes issue with Worf. Of course, the second big reveal is that changelings were after the body of Jean-Luc Picard, who must be moderately horrified to learn his corpse ended up in the hands of Starfleet intelligence in Section 31. There's further the theory that something about Picard and Crusher is special, something connected to Irumodic syndrome, and that his DNA, or mind, may hold something the changelings need. A remnant of his time as Locutus, perhaps? After all, he could still hear and feel the Borg even when disconnected, so something of the collective was left with him. So, Vadic is a changeling, which is something I was a little vague on. She seems very unhinged and unchangeling-like. even smoking cigars and delighting in the twist of the knife. Generally, the Dominion-era changelings were ruthless for sure, but cold and simply had a disregard for solid life bordering on dispassionate. She makes reference to a desire for there to be unity once more, and I wonder if she aims to unify the great link of her people into one voice again, as it was before the Dominion War. Odo's return brought with it a new view of solid life, which has caused a schism in the Great Link, a hitherto unthinkable stance. These renegades could be attempting to force cohesion once more. So, in all, for me, the episode in full was not one of my favourites this season. I enjoyed every moment of it, but even having reflected on it over the course of this review, much of my enjoyment came from the references and nostalgia to prior Trek series. Considering the subject matter of legacy in lineage woven throughout, it was understandable that it would rely a lot on hindsight. However, it was a joy to see Geordi again, and he was pretty much exactly how I pictured his return, and I'll put a pin in how I feel about more than Data's return until it plays out. Still a fantastic episode that continues the trend of Picard's Season 3 being the best of them, but maybe just a little, and I stress, a little too heavy-handed with the extraneous callbacks for my liking. Things like the Section 31 relics could have been trimmed and still made plot sense, although the fact that they are harbouring the bodies of Enterprise captains was established by the remains of James Kirk earlier on, so maybe I'm being a little harsh. Thanks for watching this review of Episode 6. I've been Rick, and I'll see you later for another one. Thanks again, and goodbye.